Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Tat Tak School. This school has remained abandoned since 1988, and for fair reason. The city in which the school resides has a dark history that is said to include a few World War era massacres and all of the atrocities involving that sort of thing. It is said that the remains from some of these horrible acts were buried in the hill next to the school. Shortly before the school closed in 1988, the headmistress took her own life in one of the bathrooms while wearing a red dress, supposedly leaving behind a spirit that appears to people dressed in red. The creepiest story relating to this haunting happened in 2011 when students were exploring the abandoned school. While here, one of the students saw the lady in red, which led to them all running for the hills, but as they began to run away, one of the students began showing strange, violent behavior that had never been seen before. An ambulance ended up being called because of the entire ordeal. This is all to say that this school appears as just a broken down, forgotten about place, but there's clearly something more sinister here. In our number 9 spot today, we have 31 Granville Road. If you're a person who is interested in true crime, you might be familiar with this place already because it is the site of the infamous and horrifying Hello Kitty killing. Back in 1999, a 23-year-old woman named Fan Men Yi was working as a host at a nightclub and needed money to help support herself and her young son when she made the decision to steal the wallet of one of the clients of her workplace. She was caught for the stealing, and while she returned the money, the man demanded that she also pay him a steep fine in return for the action. She said she just needed some time to gather the cost he was asking for, but unfortunately just a few days later, this man, with the help of some accomplices, would kidnap Fan and keep her locked up for a month. She sadly suffered incredibly horrific things and later succumbed to her injuries and passed away. The address of where this all took place was an apartment building at 31 Granville Road. In 2012, the apartment was demolished, and in 2016, a new hotel was built on the site, but even still, people have reported being haunted by the ghost of this young woman. Whether haunted or not, hearing the details of this story, it totally makes sense why people would get an eerie feeling just being around that area at all. In our number 8 spot today, we have Dragon Lodge. Dragon Lodge sits on the Peak, which is one of the most expensive areas in Hong Kong for real estate, and while that means that it comes with a heavy price tag, it is also rich with terrifying tales. Dragon Lodge is said to have had many owners throughout the years, the first of which being the man who built it, but in 1920 he went bankrupt and was forced to sell it. During World War II, the lodge was occupied by Japanese soldiers, some of which are said to have taken the lives of Catholic nuns in the front courtyard. By the time the 1980s rolled around, Dragon Lodge was already referred to as one of Hong Kong's most haunted places, but despite the rumblings, the property was purchased again and there were plans for some retail development. These plans fell through, however, because when construction workers began to do some work, they too became convinced of its paranormal nature. The workers continually reported the sounds of a crying child coming from the mansion and refused to continue to work on it. Since then, the mansion has remained completely untouched. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Sai Ying Pun Community Complex. This complex was first built in 1892, but its original purpose was to house medical staff. This was until the Second World War took place, and during this time it is said to have turned into quite a gruesome execution ground, and after this, the site later became a psychiatric hospital. And after it was abandoned, it was badly damaged when trespassers set fires in it, really just setting the stage for an exceptionally eerie location. In 1998, the building was given a new life once again, and it was turned into a community complex, but now there are plenty of strange reports coming from the building. While they preserved the granite exterior, inside people have reported hearing the sounds of a woman crying, mysterious footsteps. There have been alleged sightings of a devil-like man wearing traditional clothing roaming around the halls. There's said to be a ghost that bursts into flames. This is all to say that there are plenty of ghosts here. While they are trying to do their best to rebrand this haunted location, the nickname High Street Haunted House hasn't quite escaped it yet. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Louis Seng Chung. Back in 2012, this location was turned into a Chinese medicine and healthcare center for Baptist University, but prior to that, it sat empty for decades due to the haunting tales that come from within. It is said that there were plans to remodel the building a while ago, back in the 80s, but those working on the building, construction and cleaning crew alike, began to fall ill one by one. At first I thought that there were probably just some toxic chemicals in the building or something like that, but it wasn't the same illness. Things were different, and sometimes it wasn't illness, it was a fatal accident. Things were also disappearing, and this all led to the work on the building being stopped. Some of the workers even reported seeing figures, like a group of children playing soccer, but instead of a ball, it was a head. Sometimes at night, the upper level floors would light up on their own and shadowy figures could be seen roaming around the hallways. In our number 5 spot today, we have Bride's Pool. While Bride's Pool is gorgeous, it's a rock pool with waterfalls surrounding it. It gets its name and haunting story from a tragic accident. Legend goes that 4 men were carrying a bride-to-be to her groom's village on a chair, and to get to the village they needed to pass over the pool. As they pass over one of the waterfalls, one of the men slipped on a rock and all of them fell below into the pool, sadly passing away in the tragic accident. Now the bride, having never made it to her groom, awaits at the bottom of the pool, waiting for her groom to return. There have also been reports of people taking their lives here, and in 1982, at one point, there were even human remains discovered that turned out to belong to a man who was killed by his fiancée. The horrible stories clearly just don't end, and they even extend up to the road that sits above the pool, which now has the nickname of the Deadly Curve, based on the high number of accidents that resulted into fatalities. Maybe it's just the bad luck of the pool. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Murray House. This is another one of these spots that now has a life far past its haunting history. The Murray House is now the home to restaurants that sit on the waterfront and places to shop, but it once was the officers' quarters of the Murray Barracks in 1846. Flash forward a bit to the Japanese occupation, and this building was seeing horrifying crimes carried out against the citizens of Hong Kong. From here, stories of ghosts and hauntings at the site became so bad that the government actually ordered for there to be 2 exorcisms there, one in 1963 and one in 1974, and they were aimed at freeing these souls who were clearly stuck here. Eventually, the building was dismantled and all of the items in the house were moved into storage for a while before, in 2000, it was decided to move and rebuild the structure to Stanley, where it still stands now. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Namku Terrace. This location was first built in 1915 by a wealthy family who was involved in the silk trade. The same family lived here until World War II, when they were forced to flee the city. Once abandoned by the family, soldiers began to seize property in the area to hold people and items, and this specific location was used to house women who were being held by the soldiers. These soldiers did horrific things to these women, some leading to the women passing away, and since these incredibly atrocious acts, the terrace has constantly had stories coming from it that tell the tales of ghosts wandering the house. Some passerbys even hear screaming coming from the home and see strange shadows in the windows. Back in 2003, a group of students decided to try and camp out for a night in the haunted house in the hopes of seeing a ghost, but in the end they got a lot more than they bargained for. Police ended up being called when one of the students claimed to be possessed by a spirit and ended up needing to be hospitalized. In the end, the home sat completely vacant for 18 years until recently, when the current owners expressed their plans to restore the building. In our number 2 spot today, we have Solo Pun. This abandoned village has a name that means locked compass, and this name comes from the reports that compasses very creepily seem to stop working nearby and in this village. The exact reason for the abandonment of this village is unknown. There are plenty of stories, however. Some believe that everyone went missing overnight, others believe that the villagers died on the way to a wedding in a boating accident and the survivors couldn't stand to remain in the village. Whatever the reason, the village appears as if one day everybody just up and left, never to be seen again. This is why this spot is now a heavily visited area. It definitely gives that eerie, uneasy feeling when you're around it. If you were to take a trip there, the closest road is about 3 hours away, however, so you'll find yourself hiking for quite a good chunk of that trip. In our number 1 spot today, we have the White House Compound. Also known as the Victoria Road Detention Center, this place is familiar to many as it was used as a place to hold political prisoners and those suspected of spying during the 1967 riots. This means that it was also a place where many people were treated horribly, harmed, and executed. Prisoners were held in tiny cells under horrible conditions, and some even were held in solitary confinement for months on end. After the end of the riots, the place was abandoned, and it was forgotten about by many, except for those who knew what kind of horrors happened inside. From the time it was abandoned up until quite recently, this place was unmarked. There weren't signs, and it wasn't even placed on maps. That was until 2018, when it was converted into an overseas campus for the University of Chicago Booth School of Business as a way to redevelop the site and hopefully give it a much brighter future.
Number 9, we have the East Tahang Glass Walk. The bridge in the Tahang Mountains is both thrilling and terrifying. The glass platform is 3,800 feet in the air and is affixed to the mountainside. If you had vertigo, you would not be feeling so great standing on this glass-bottomed walkway staring down into the abyss. There are videos of people literally freaking out out as they walk over the bridge. Fear and panic sets in, but even worse, the bridge features a joke cracking effect that's caused people to heavily freak out. Not only that, the cracking effect comes with sound that would really get me. A lot of people have hailed the effect as extremely cruel and dangerous, but China doesn't care. Coming into number 8, we have the Delinga test sites. Not that you could get anywhere near it, but Delinga County is home to a worrying nuclear test site. 12 years ago, Delinga was totally out of limits to foreigners. These days you can go there, but the bases in the northern reaches of the country are army patrolled. Even if they weren't, you really wouldn't fancy wading into a nuclear wasteland. There are 36 launch pads in and around Delinga. Coming into number 7, we have the North Korean border. The North Korean border is a dangerous place to be for obvious reasons, and it would be even scarier if you were alone. There are some reports that the Chinese military might be up to something over there too. Border regions are always sensitive places to be, but the river that separates China and North Korea at Dedong is particularly so because it's so small. As a non-Asian, you may encounter some issues at the area. While the Dedong and Bridge of Friendship area is safe enough for careful tourists, there are some parts of the China-North Korea border which are not very well defined. Accidentally strolling into North Korean territory is a genuine risk. Coming into number 6, we have the Lotus Pond. The Lotus Pond in the University of Hong Kong looks like a place I would love to visit. It's beautiful. I can imagine sitting here and doing some quiet reflection. I'd probably be alright doing this, but if you're a man, you shouldn't ever come here alone. The pond is at the center of a ghost story involving a lost love. A young couple who would meet by the pond planned to run away together. The girl arranged to meet her love by the pond at midnight, and they were about to start their journey, only he didn't show up. As she headed home, worried and devastated, she saw her boyfriend with another girl. She burst into tears, and in her anguish she threw herself into the pond and drowned. To this day, if a man is walking alone by the pond at midnight, he should be very careful. If he sees a girl, he shouldn't talk to her, as the story goes that the girl's ghost appears after the stroke of 12 and looks to drag men into a watery grave if they engage with her. Coming into number 5, we have Chennai number 81. This terrifying building is located in Beijing and is at the center of a lot of mysticism. The building is sometimes known as the Chennai Church, and it is thought that it used to be used for religious purposes before it was taken over by the communists. The house used to be owned by a Nationalist Party officer, but he then fled to Taiwan, leaving his wife. She in turn hung herself at the home, and her screams are said to be heard wailing out to this day. Again, to this day, the house, which is supposed to be prime real estate, is abandoned and overgrown with ivy. Why? Some say that a number of those who have entered the house have simply not left. Guessing you absolutely don't want to go here alone. This scary house was the setting for a Chinese horror film in 2014 called The House That Never Dies. Rightio then. Coming into number 4, we have the tomb of Qin Shi Huang. The tomb of the former Chinese emperor Qin Shi Huang was discovered when the Terracotta Army was unearthed. The emperor was largely considered to be the first ever emperor of China, having unified 6 fighting states. His death in 210 BC was a big deal, and he entered the afterlife with terracotta replicas of his army, his horses, his family, and his servants. The Terracotta Army was discovered in 1974 in Xi'an and was a pretty special place. It's a great place to visit, but definitely very eerie. The thing is that the actual mausoleum, the burial chamber of the emperor, is out of bounds, and it always has been. The Chinese government simply will not let you in. Now, excavations are banned, and if you were caught there, you would have to answer to armed guards. Beyond that, who knows what spooks lay in wait. It is said that the earth near the tomb is also booby-trapped. On top of that, we all know what happened when the Egyptian tombs were opened. You don't want to be dealing with that level of pestilence, especially not alone. Coming into number 3, we have Subway Line 1. In Beijing, I would be pretty terrified to ride Subway Line 1 alone. The line was first constructed in 1965, and its build was fraught with accidents, including broken equipment and injury or death to workers. It seems that the original build disturbed souls whose graves were disturbed as construction was taking place. As a result, monks were brought in to pacify the spirits. The monks promised the spirits that the metro would close before 11 PM, as it said the dead really like resting between 11 and 1 AM. Right. Honestly, is this just the government's way of taking night trains off the menu? To add spookiness to an already potentially haunted situation, there are 4 ghost stations along Subway Line 1, 2 of which are located in a military region. An abandoned station on a haunted train line. Honestly, rather you than me. Coming into number 2, we have the Forbidden City. China's Forbidden City is said to be deeply haunted. The Forbidden City is an imperial palace from the Ming dynasty to the Qing dynasty. The World Heritage Landmark gets its name from a time when public entrance was forbidden except for the members of the imperial family. The complex has seen some ghastly things over the years, including numerous executions and murders. Since 1925, the Forbidden City has slowly been opening up to visitors, and now 75% of it is available for viewing. However, there are still some secret rooms and courtyards that you're not allowed to visit. The chances of you being alone in the day in the city are pretty slim, seeing as there's around 16 million people visit every year, but at night, well, that's a scarier time altogether. Night staff have reported some terrifying things going on, including strange animals, ghosts, dogs, ghost dogs as well, menacing presences, and a weeping woman in white. I honestly really wouldn't fancy being alone here at night. Finally, coming into number 1, we have the Gobi Desert. The Gobi Desert borders China and Mongolia and is not a place to be visited solo. Aside from deserts being stressful places for solo trips anyway because of the harsh elements and the isolation, this desert is in particular pretty extreme. It's said to be home to the legendary Mongolian deathworm, which doesn't sound like a thing I want to party with. The Mongolian deathworm first came to light in the West when explorer and naturalist Roy Chapman Andrews wrote about his expedition into the Gobi in 1926. It's said to be between 2 and 5 feet long, so up to 1.5 meters. Reports have said it's supposed to be shaped like a sausage with neither head nor tail. It's poisonous and touching it could induce death. Not only that, some accounts say that the worm spews deadly sulfuric acid and emits a strangely deadly electrical charge. Venturing into a desert on your own is a bad idea, but how would you face the Mongolian deathworm solo?
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the single braid story. The road that runs along the campus of the Chinese University of Hong Kong is referred to as Single Braid Road, and this is the story that gave it that name. On a cold night, a girl with a long braid in her hair went to great lengths in order to sneak into Hong Kong from the mainland with her boyfriend. They boarded a train to head into the city when they saw police on the train checking people's identification. Because she wasn't supposed to be there and had snuck in, she decided the only thing to do would be to try and jump off of the moving train. In a gruesome turn of events, her braid ended up getting stuck in the window and ripped off all of the skin from her scalp and face. The girl stumbled onto the road where she collapsed and died. Throughout all of this, her boyfriend continued on the train, went into the city, got a new job, and pretended like the girl never existed. Flash forward to another night when a male student is walking alone on Single Braid Road when he sees a girl standing in the distance. He calls out to her, but she doesn't respond, so he begins to approach her and can see that she has a long braid in her hair. When he reaches her, he taps her on the shoulder, and when she turns around, he sees that she has no face. Then she just disappears. They say that the ghost has appeared many times since then, but only male students can hear her. I just want it to be known that if I was in her place and a boy did that to me, I would absolutely come back to haunt him and all men for the rest of eternity.
Moving on to number 9, we have Room 111. And if you're liking this video so far, then make sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to our channel because you know what? It really helps us out, so thank you very much. Now, much like most of these stories, this one has evolved over time, so there are 2 versions of the story. The one I'm about to tell you surrounds a very intelligent science undergraduate who thought he discovered how to master time travel. So one night in room 111 of Grace Tian Hall, he wrapped himself up in a mechanism he had created. It was a bunch of wires attached to an alarm clock and a big battery. When the clock's alarm went off, he believed he was going to be able to travel in time. But the experiment went terribly wrong, as you could have imagined, and he ended up being electrocuted to death. His roommate found him laying in bed with a note beside him reading, "I will come back soon." Upon this discovery, the roommate went mad and had to be taken to a mental asylum. And now, no one ever dares to stay in room 111 for the events that happen there.
In our number 8 spot today, we have the story of the hanged ghost. While ghosts are extremely common in Chinese folklore, these ghosts are pretty specific. A hanged ghost is a spirit of someone who is hanged, whether it be from committing suicide or execution, and they haunt the location where they died. While most ghosts are already pretty creepy, the hanged ghosts have quite an appearance. They're said to appear as a corpse with a long red tongue that hangs out of their mouth. The goal of these ghosts is to try and convince anyone they come across to join them in the afterlife.
Making our way down the list, number 7, we have the painted skin. This story has to do with a demon that hides its true gruesome appearance by transforming into other people. So one day this man named Wang runs into this beautiful woman on the street that claims to be homeless. He takes her home and hides her in his house from his wife, and he has an affair with this mystery homeless woman. Well, eventually a priest warns him that there's evil in his house, but he ignores it until one day he looks into his window and sees the woman is actually a green-faced monster with sharp, jagged teeth. She had been wearing a mask made out of human skin. The story basically ends with the guy getting his heart ripped out by the demon, and then the demon transforms into different people to hide his identity. In the climax, the demon shows its true self, and the priest beheads it with his wooden sword. And then Wang's wife just coughs up his heart and puts it back into Wang's chest, and then he's brought back to life. Crazy, I know. Also, what kind of a bedtime story is this, really?
Coming in at number 6, we have the Little Finger story. There was a male university student who often found himself studying in the library late after it had closed. After his study session, he would walk past a park on his way back to his dorm, and he always saw a small little girl sitting on a swing in the park. One day he decided to go and speak to the little girl and check on her. From that night on, every time he passed the park and saw her there, he would stop in and chat with her before returning home. One day he was telling his friends about this little girl, and they asked what she looked like. He described the girl, and his friends told him that she sounded like she looked exactly like a teacher's daughter who had tragically died in a car accident, but that daughter had lost her little finger. The next night, when the man went to go and see the little girl in the park, he couldn't help but ask to see her hands, just to check. She was very reluctant, but he insisted. And when she finally revealed her hands, he saw that she was in fact missing her little finger. Of course this freaked him out, so he ran away in fear. From then on, he never saw the little girl again.
We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Mongolian death worm. The Mongolian death worm is a famous cryptid in China. It's said to lurk in the Gobi Desert and is described as being this giant red-type worm creature. It's said to be between 2 to 5 feet long and is as thick as a man's arm. But the creature can grow even bigger than that. As a result of its appearance, it's sometimes called the intestine worm. On top of it all, it can also spray venom at its victims from a far distance. Its acid-like venom is so strong that it can kill a camel or horse. Now, many believe this creature is said to be true and have even gone to the desert in search of it. So far, it has come of nothing, and let's keep it that way.
Moving on down to number 4, today we have the oxtail soup story. There was a young couple who were in medical school together. They lived in the same dorm, but on different floors, and there was a really strict study curfew that left them little to no time to see each other. It's also worth mentioning that this story comes from a time when there were no cell phones, so they couldn't just slide into each other's DMs or have a quick FaceTime in order to catch up. Every night the girl would make oxtail soup, and because her boyfriend lived directly below her, she would send a cup of soup down from her window. They both loved this little tradition that they had set up, and it made them feel close even when they couldn't speak or see each other. One night, the boy received his soup, ate it, and then fell asleep studying. The next day, he had time to go up and see his girlfriend, so he headed to her floor, but he couldn't find her. He ended up asking around and came to find that his girlfriend had actually died a few days before due to a sudden illness. He was, of course, suddenly overwhelmed with grief and the terrible news, but then it quickly hit him. If his girlfriend had died a few days ago, who had given him the soup the night before?
In at number 3 for you, we have the hopping corpse. The Jiangshi, otherwise known as the Chinese zombie or the Chinese hopping vampire or the hopping zombie, is a pretty well-known creature of Chinese folklore. This creature's name translates to rigid bodies or stiff corpse, and it's said to be corpses that have come back to life to kill the living. They are described as having greenish, rotting flesh and move by hopping. You'll know when one's coming if you hear thump, thump, thump. That's the sound of the monster hopping to get you, to suck the soul out of you like a vampire. In order to scare off these creatures, you need to use mirrors because they are scared of their own reflections, and also they don't like the brightness of mirrors. For some reason, a hopping zombie is way scarier to me than one that limps slowly. I don't know what it is about it.
In our number 2 spot today, we have the Lotus Pond story. This story starts off with a young couple who were so in love that they planned to run away together and elope. They made a plan to meet at midnight at the Lotus Pond, and from there they would leave and go start their lives together. When the girl showed up at midnight, she waited for so long, but the boy never showed up. She left the pond and went back into town when she spotted her boyfriend with another woman. She was so heartbroken and upset that she began crying and could not stop. She was so distraught that she went back to the Lotus Pond where they had planned to meet and drowned herself. Months later, another couple had planned to meet at the Lotus Pond. The boy got to the pond early and was waiting for his girlfriend to arrive when he heard a female voice say, "I asked you to meet me at midnight, didn't I?" The boy was really confused because this wasn't the meeting time that him and his partner had discussed, and he responded, "No." All of a sudden, 2 pale white hands reached out of the water and dragged him under the pond, drowning him. Ever since then, it is said that if you are at the Lotus Pond at midnight and you encounter a girl or hear her voice, do not answer her questions or even look at her, or she will get you too.
And in our number 1 spot, we have Bus 375. On midnight of November 14th, 1995, Bus 375, the last bus of the night, pulled into Summer Palace's bus terminal. It was known as the Midnight Bus, or the bus to Fragrant Hills, because that's where the bus was headed. But on this night, the bus disappeared under mysterious circumstances. At the bus terminal, 2 passengers got on, an old man and a young man. While headed to the last stop, the bus driver spotted 3 shadows waving at the side of the road. The bus driver stopped and it was 3 men and he let them on. But something wasn't right about them, and you couldn't see any of their faces. Shortly after the 3 people got on, the old man picked a fight with the young man, claiming he stole his wallet. The argument got so bad that they got kicked off of the bus. When they got off and the bus zoomed away, the old man was no longer angry, and he told the young man that he had just saved their lives. The 3 passengers that got on were ghosts. He noticed that they didn't have any feet and that they were floating. The next day, the 2 learned that Bus 375 vanished, only to be found 3 days later at the bottom of a lake. Inside the bus, there were 3 decomposed corpses. Now, some believe that this is a true story, and to this day, it remains an unsolved mystery. So starting off this countdown, we have Ordos Kangbashi, and I apologize, I know I'm going to butcher every single name on this list. Please give me a break, okay? I suck at pronunciations, especially cities that I've never been to. So this is the most famous ghost city in China and the world's largest ghost town. Located in Inner Mongolia, Ordos Kangbashi was meant to be a modern city with a new style of architecture. There's tons of unique looking buildings, large stadiums, theaters, and big public spaces. It was actually called the Dubai of China. Just one problem. It lacks people. The city was built for 300,000 people, but only 70,000 ended up moving to live there. Then, after running out of funding, construction on the city just stopped. Nowadays, there are tons of unfinished and empty apartments. Now it's called a modern ghost town, a stillborn city and a failed utopia. If you travel the area, it is beautiful with its buildings, but the silence and the emptiness is very frightening. Not only that, but beneath the streets is is a whole underground parking system, which will give you nightmares. It looks like a giant underground doomsday bunker. Moving on to number 9, we have Tianducheng. The Tianducheng is known for being a copycat of Paris. Seriously, it was designed to look like as if you are in Paris. The streets look just like the ones in France, and they have a replica of the Medici fountain. To top it all off, they even have their very own Eiffel Tower. But sadly, it wasn't as successful as they hoped, and now many of the buildings remain deserted. Now people think of it as a creepy version of France. Many visitors feel uneasy walking down the streets. The once beautiful city now has stores with cracked and worn paint, and has a bunch of creepy statues with eyes that look like they follow your every move. In fact, some stores are nothing more than walls that they painted to look like stores and storefronts with like windows with merchandise in the windows. Kinda weird, kinda creepy. In our 8th spot, we have Chang'an. On May 20th, 2011, the construction of the city of Chang'an in Yunnan was approved. 100,000 new apartments were built, but they have no occupants. You have enormous office buildings with no workers, big streets with no cars. Now it's considered one of the largest ghost towns in Asia. What's creepy is that sections of the city remain uncompleted. There are dirt roads all trashed with rubble. It literally looks like an apocalyptic area. It's very creepy, especially when it's dead silent and all you can hear is the wind whistling through the abandoned buildings. Coming in at number 7, we have the Guangdong province. The Guangdong province is home to tons of abandoned villages, but the one I want to talk about is the village of Dakito. This village is known to have a ghostly presence, and it's said to be haunted, but there's hardly any information out there on it. So I don't know what exactly happened there or why it's abandoned, but all I know is that something sinister haunts the land. Coming in at number 6, we have Ujiapu. Referred to as China's Manhattan, Ujiapu was created to be a center for world trade and finance, but more than 22 buildings are still unfinished, and there are no citizens working inside the tall buildings. A cab driver described the area as the following: there's just nobody there. It's like having a good-for-nothing child. His words, not mine. He says at night, the area is 10 times creepier, with brightly lit roads, but no one driving on them. He claims that one time he was driving down the road when he saw headlights coming towards him, as if a car was going to crash into him head on. He braced for impact, but nothing hit him. When he looked back, there was nothing there. So what were the lights that he saw? I have no idea, but he's terrified of the area and thinks it's haunted. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Dandong New District. The new district of Dandong features a giant shopping mall, huge government offices, a basketball stadium, and 60+ apartment towers. There's even a huge Ferris wheel. It seems like a really impressive city until you actually go there and find that it's all just for show. The Ferris wheel doesn't even work, and no one lives there. So this city is actually part of a border zone between North Korea. The Globe and Mail states, and I quote, "Part of the lure of the Dandong New District was supposed to be its proximity to Sinuiju, the North Korean city on the opposite bank of the narrow Yalu River. But since it's so close, citizens were worried that they would be exposed to possible radiation from North Korea's nuclear tests. So now, no one really wants to live there." Making our way down the list, number 4, we have Nanhui New City. Nanhui New City, formerly named Lingang New City, is located 60 kilometers southeast of downtown Shanghai. The city was said to become a mini Hong Kong, but as we know, that didn't happen. The construction of the city began in 2003 and was said to be done by 2020, but it's nowhere near completion, and some believe that it will never be completed. In fact, 8 university campuses were built, and it could house more than 800,000 people, but now it remains abandoned. In fact, it's said that in order to build the city, one homeless man's shelter was destroyed in the process, and with nowhere to go, he committed suicide. People believe that he now will haunt the area and whoever decides to live there. In our 3rd spot, we have Cafe Dien. Construction of the city began in the early 2000s. It was planned to be the solution to Beijing's pollution problem. It was going to be an eco-city, but the project was abandoned due to lack of government support and funding issues. It was built to hold millions of people, but only a few thousand live there. You got locked up abandoned hotels and unfinished buildings. One woman said, and I quote, "I was very sad when I saw how underdeveloped it was. I went back crying all all the way. But due to the city's high amount of abandoned buildings, it attracts a lot of urban explorers. But sadly, a group of explorers died after a structural collapse in one of the buildings they were exploring. In our second spot, we have Lanzhou New Area. Built in a sandy plateau area, some parts of the city literally look like you're in a desert. So when you first enter the city, you'll see a huge sign that says, "Welcome to the Oasis City." But it looks nothing like an oasis. The welcome sign looks like it leads to nothing. It looks very barren. But in some areas of the city, you will notice that there are replicas of the Parthenon and the Great Sphinx of Giza. And that's pretty cool. But they're still under construction. So in order to create this city, hundreds of sandy hills were bulldozed down, and some mountains were even cut down. There are some buildings, but it mainly looks like a huge sandstorm just took place and then engulfed most of the buildings. Now, some people do live there, but it's still considered a ghost city as it houses far less than anticipated. Legend goes that the ancient Egyptian god Khafre is cursing this area for having a replica of his Sphinx. Most researchers believe that the Sphinx was meant to act as a guardian for the pharaoh Khafre, whose pyramid is located beside it. So now, Khafre is mad and has made sure that the construction will never be completed and that it will never be a successful city. And in our number one spot, we have Miexi Lake City. I know for sure I pronounced that name wrong. The construction of the city began in 2007 and it was meant to be a highly sustainable city. The whole thing was designed to be eco-friendly and low carbon dependent. The project was described as this, and I quote, "Water is the primary element of design and acts as the heart and center of the master plan." They were going to have a huge lake that was going to be the main source of transportation. So people were going to be boating around, which was said to reduce pollution. And not only that, there were going to be canals that connected you to around the city. They expected a population of 206,000 people living there, but it was never really completed and is now an abandoned project. I mean, it was a pretty cool idea, but I don't know how many people are going to just love boating around instead of driving. Now, the city looks pretty beautiful and not creepy at all. Then again, rumor has it that the lake it was built near has been the site of multiple drownings. But of course, the government thought that was going to be bad news for their city, so they did whatever they could to try and hide the past.
Starting off this terrifying list, in at number 10 with the bus 375. This is a scary Chinese urban legend about a bus in Beijing that disappeared during a cold November night. According to the legend, there was a driver, conductor, and 4 passengers riding on bus 375 at midnight. During the ride, the bus picked up 2 strange men who were holding a third man by his shoulders. They went to the back of the bus and they sat there in silence. One of the passengers was an elderly woman and she was highly disturbed by the 3 men. She felt as if something bad was going to happen. So after a few stops, 2 of the passengers got off the bus and then the elderly woman decided to cause a scene in order to get herself and the other passengers off of the bus. Once they were off of the bus, the old woman apologized to the other passengers and she said that she was positive that those 3 men on the bus were ghosts and that something horrible would happen to the bus. Sure enough, the next morning the bus was found submerged in water and the bodies of the driver, the conductor, and the unidentified men were found. Wow, talk about creepy. The banana tree ghost lurks into number 9. Legend has it that if you go into the forest at night, you might hear loud crying from the spirits of a haunted ghost. If you follow the sound, you'll come across a woman who sometimes is holding a baby. According to the legend, these banana tree ghosts will give you the winning lottery numbers in exchange for their freedom. In order to get the winning lottery numbers, you are supposed to tie a red string around the banana tree trunk, stab sharp nails to the string, and then tie the other end of rope to your bed. Well, there have been some greedy people who have done this, but they did not fulfill their promise to free the ghost. So in return, once they win the lottery, they suffer from a slow, agonizing, and painful death. Number 8 takes us to a single braid. There was a road called Single Braid Road that runs along the campus of the Chinese University of Hong Kong. It is called Single Braid Road after an urban legend that involves a female ghost with long braided hair walking alone at night. According to the legend, during one cold night, a girl with long braided hair snuck onto a train that was traveling from Hong Kong to the mainland. She was an illegal immigrant and she saw that police officers were asking people for their tickets and identification. So instead of getting caught and possibly arrested, she jumped off the moving train, but her braid got caught, so her hair, skull, and skin were ripped off of her face. I mean, is this real life right now? Her boyfriend saw what happened and he didn't report it to the police and he never looked for her. So now on this road at nighttime, male students have claimed that they will see a woman who has no face lurking around the campus looking for her boyfriend to get her revenge. The Mongolian death worm wiggles in at number 7. This terrifying creature is believed to exist in the most desolated parts of the Gobi Desert. The Mongolian death worm is red in color, between 2 and 5 feet long, and they have a very thick body. According to the urban legends, the nightmarish creature travels underground and they create waves of sand on the surface. These creatures hunt livestock and humans. They are highly venomous and they're able to spray their venom at their prey or electrocute them. The Mongolians believe that if you touch any part of the worm, you will die from a very painful and fast death. Fox demons run into number 6. These demons appear to look like beautiful and seductive women who will try to seduce men. If these unsuspected men fall victim to the fox demon, then they will find themselves at the mercy of the demon, because in order to maintain their beautiful appearances, they have to consume human hearts or livers. The urban legend states that if you see villagers' corpses lying around with their hearts or livers dug out, there's a highly probability that a fox demon is lurking around and you need to be on the lookout, or you can find yourself becoming the next victim. Next up, in at number 5 is the Lotus Pond. This urban legend is centered around a young couple who were in love and they were planning on running away together to elope and get married. They made plans to meet at the Lotus Pond around midnight. However, when the girl showed up, she was waiting at the Lotus Pond for a long time. So when she went to look for her boyfriend, she saw him with another woman. She was so upset by this that she committed suicide by drowning in the pond. After she died, another young couple decided to meet by the Lotus Pond. The boy was early, and as he was waiting, he heard a female voice behind him say, "I asked you to meet me at midnight, didn't I?" The boy said, "No, you didn't," and all of a sudden, 2 pale, ghostly hands emerged from the water and dragged him into the pond. He was drowned to death, and ever since then, there is an unwritten rule that if you go to the Lotus Pond during midnight and you see a girl, you should never answer her question or look at her. Otherwise, you'll find yourself in a lot of danger. The hanged ghost falls into number 4. These are the most common types of ghosts in Chinese folklore, and they are the angry spirits of people who have committed suicide or they were the victims of executions. They are believed to haunt the locations where they died, and according to the urban legends, they look like a corpse with a very long red tongue that hangs out of their mouth. They are also supposed to be highly convincing, and they will attempt to persuade you to join them in the afterlife by killing yourself. Hanged ghosts are said to be very powerful, so if you ever find a hanged ghost, you are most likely going to be their next victim. The ghost woman haunts her way into number 3. Legends has it that the New Gui, or ghost woman, was severely wronged in her life, and she is resurrected from the dead in order to seek revenge on the man who betrayed or harmed her. She will literally search for any and all men who have done women wrong, and she will suck the living essence out of her enemies. These ghosts are often women who have been murdered or abused by their husbands, and because of the pain they have endured, these ghosts will come back and brutally kill men and only scare women. The Shui Gui makes its way onto this list at number 2. If you guys have a fear of drowning, I would avoid, swimming in China, and this is because according to Chinese urban legends, the Shui Gui are very vengeful ghosts of people who have drowned. These water ghosts lurk in the same spot where they have unfortunately died in the water, and they wait patiently for a person to swim near them. Once they've found their unsuspecting victim, the Shui Gui will drag them underwater, drown them, and the new person will become the new ghost, and the cycle will continue on forever. Oh, and apparently the Shui Gui will also take possession of the body and come back to life, while the victim's spirit will now try to take control of another living person's body. Finally, at the top of this frightening list, in at number 1, we have the Jiangshi, or otherwise known as the Chinese vampire. These haunted creatures are a mixture between a zombie and a vampire. Yeah, no thanks. Well, their corpse rise from the dead, and their sole purpose is to kill the living and to absorb their spirits. During the day, these creepy creatures remain in their coffins or they hide in dark caves, but during the night, they walk like zombies and prey on innocent people. The Jiangshi have the power to breathe life into corpses, and they also have the ability to build a body with bones or rotten flesh. They apparently have red eyes, sharp claws, and greenish skin. Well, if I lived in China, I would be making myself a safe room to hide in during the nighttime, because it seems like nowhere is safe.